Hi, welcome. This is Vince of vinceprep.com and Agos, Admissions Consulting. The optional essay or additional essay that a lot of schools ask for causes a lot of anxiety, and I'm going to explain the logic of how to approach this type of essay. So first of all, let me define and give some examples of what I'm talking about. So there are certain schools like Stanford that say, through all the elements of your application, we believe we get to know you well. Complete this section only if you have critical information you could not convey elsewhere on your application. For example, extenuating circumstances affecting academic or work performance. Do not include essays and be brief. And so this is something that you won't find on the essays page. So first of all, the topic gets confused because my website, which I'm going to be updating, says optional essays. This is not an essay, and in fact they tell you here, don't include an essay, but it's a written answer. It's not data, it's words. Not numbers, it's words, it's narrative. And the most important thing is it involves a bit of strategy. You've got to decide what to include, if anything, in this application. This is part of the small boxes, I call them. You know, the schools are asking you for lots of information. They're asking you for a resume or CV, usually one page. They're asking you for application data form. Stanford this year has more data requested in the online application. Stanford wins. They request more little boxes full of written answers than even Harvard this year. Definitely more than Wharton, certainly more than Columbia, a lot more than Kellogg. Kellogg and MIT, the online application forms are pretty minimal. Chicago as well. Stanford asks for most of all. And so here they're basically saying, don't tell us anything else unless. So this is what I call a closed type of question. So in this video, I'm going to be going through school by school all of the what I consider top schools that I cover. The schools I cover in depth, as you've probably seen on my website, are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Chicago, Columbia, Kellogg, MIT, Berkeley, Insead, and London Business School. So in those top, what I call top 10 schools, I'm going to be analyzing how each of them deals with additional information, whether it's in an essay or in a small box. So this first video is all about schools that I call closed. These are schools that really don't want you to answer this question unless you must. It's best to say nothing here unless you have to. If you must tell them something, tell them something. If you don't need to, don't say anything. They really think about, put yourself in their shoes. From your perspective, you're like, oh, I'm so interesting, I'm so complicated, I have so many things I want you to know. And that's fair, of course. You want to be judged accurately and fairly. From the school's perspective, they're busy reading thousands or tens of thousands of applications, and so they want to be able to evaluate you with as little information as possible. So Stanford definitely is one of these what I call closed schools, and I've read that question. Let's talk about Wharton. Wharton's confusing because they have both. In the next video, I'll talk about their encouraged sort of open question, which is they give you 400 words to tell them pretty much anything you want. And most of my clients use some or all of those 400 words to tell them something positive. I want you to know this about me because it shows something about me that you otherwise wouldn't know, and that's an important part of my candidacy because XYZ. I'll talk about that in my next video. This video, in the closed group, there is this 250 word question which says, kind of, and it's vague, and I wish Wharton would fix this and make it more clear, but basically they're saying all applicants, including reapplicants, can also use this section to address any extenuating circumstances. And I've copied and pasted here from a few years ago. I can't find this anymore on Wharton's website, but a few years ago they defined extenuating circumstances as unexplained gaps in work experience, choice of recommenders, questionable academic performance, or significant weaknesses in your application. Significant weaknesses in your application could be scores. But again, I don't think there's really a great excuse for a low GMAT or low whatever GRE, TOEFL or IELTS if you need it. But you could try. Let me say one more thing before I go through the list here. The schools I'm going to be covering in this video are how Stanford defines extenuating circumstances, Wharton's additional or closed only if type of optional question, optional in this case essay. Columbia also extenuating circumstances style, but their wording is tricky. I'm going to talk about their wording. Kellogg, very clear wording, not vague at all. I'll go through that. Insead, very clear as well. And then finally Harvard, which is sort of a mixed, it's both closed and open. I'll talk about that. So that's a preview of what's in store in this video. So the first thing I just want to say about why this stuff matters, okay? I know admissions officers. I meet them through AGAC, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. We host conferences. We're usually hosted by a school or a group of schools. This year we'll be in Boston, hosted by a bunch of schools there, primarily brought there and invited by MIT. Thank you, MIT. While we're there, we talk to admissions officers. So I talk to admissions officers every chance I get because I want to understand how they think. And here's how I think they evaluate you. They evaluate you from several perspectives. The first question I think they ask themselves, or one of the first questions is, can she do the work? MBA is not intensely academic like maybe at the beginning of medical school is known to, or law school certainly, lots of reading and writing, highly analytical. Business school has analytics, has quantitative aspects, but it's mostly, a friend of mine told me the other day, who's a lawyer, he said, he tells his friends who are asking him about graduate school, he's like, look, if you don't like to write, get an MBA, which I thought was pretty funny. It's like, law school's a lot of writing, a lot of analysis. People will argue with me. My friends who are MBAs will say, hey, I'm academic. I'm not saying you're not smart. I'm saying it's more about emotional intelligence maybe than what we call, IQ. It's business. It's about networking and knowing people and getting along well. Of course, there's academic work involved. Some schools are more rigorous or problem set based, but basically, can you do the work? So in the case of Harvard, it's can you talk and can you process information quickly, auditorily and verbally? Can you understand what's being said and jump into the conversation regardless of your native language, English or not? Are you verbal? Are you an orator? Do you like to talk? And can you say something intelligent that you haven't prepared ahead of time? Harvard case method, you need to know that. Anyway, school by school, they ask themselves, can he do the work academically? So that's when it says here, extenuating circumstances affecting academic performance. So if your transcript has a bunch of D or F grades, or even one or more D's or F's, explain them. Don't make up a big excuse, just simply be straight. What happened? I was the varsity captain of the team and we were traveling too much that season and I missed the final exam, or I had pneumonia or death in the family or whatever it was, or I was working 5 jobs because I was paying for college or whatever it is. Or just simply I didn't prioritize my time well, or whatever it is. Just try to say it as well as and as briefly and concisely as you can and get over it. So academically, they see those low grades. If it's countered by a super high GMAT, maybe they won't even worry, but if your GMAT's average, Stanford GMAT 730, if you have a 700 GMAT and some D's and F's, explain them, especially if you have a 600 or 550 GMAT. Explain the low grades, why you got them. Don't make it long, be brief, as they say. So they're asking themselves, can she do the work? They're also asking them, they're looking at it sort of from a career perspective. They have a career services center, but at the AGAC conference, often we have a panel where the career service office people talk to us, and we understand how sometimes the admissions office and the career service office collaborate on an application. If the admissions office isn't sure about something, they often, or sometimes, might show your file to the career services people and say, what do you think of this background? Is this person hireable? So can you do the work? Can you get a job after MBA? It's another big part of their admissions criteria because They want you to be successful in your career so that they look good, right? You're carrying their brand out in the world. They want you to be highly successful, a role model for others, and hopefully eventually be so successful that you can contribute back to the school and donate to the school with your time and even your money. They want to know that you're going to be that kind of alum. So that's why work performance matters. So you'll see later on when I go through these schools and how they explain it. So Columbia here, for example, Columbia's funny. It says, is there any further information that you wish to provide the admissions committee? If that's all they said, is there any further information that you wish to provide us? A huge majority of my clients, much more than half of them, wish they could explain something to the admissions committee that doesn't fit in the small boxes or the CV resume or the essays, which are also limited. So you'd see that and you'd think it's an open question, like MIT or London, very open. Please tell us something. And you better tell them something. But then, and I also wish they'd clean up this language a little bit. I think both they and Wharton are a bit vague. Then they say, if so, use this space to provide an explanation of any areas of concern in your academic record or personal history. So it's a little bit, you wish you could tell them this much, but then they're limiting you to only really, actually, it's like we only really want to hear this. So I don't find this question to be particularly well worded, but whatever, who am I? I'll tell that to the team next time I see them if they want my input, whatever. But it's 500 words, and it's not quite an essay, but I don't remember, is this listed on their essay question or is this inside the application? But somewhere in there, Wharton gives you these 500 words. Most of my clients leave this blank. Just like with Stanford and Wharton, the 250 word version, it's better to say nothing unless you have to. Kellogg, good job to Kellogg. Kudos to Kellogg admissions director for the new director Beth has, I think, done a very good job with her team of really being very clear and saying, if needed, use this section to briefly describe any extenuating circumstances. And again, helpful, they define that as unexplained gaps in work experience. That's important because a recruiter is going to notice that. There's a 6-month gap between your first job and your second job, or you weren't working before MBA. You just need to be able to explain it because you're going to need to be able to explain it to a recruiter before you get an internship or a job. You should also be able to explain it briefly to the admissions director. Choice of recommenders, as with all these schools, they like to see a recommendation letter from your current direct boss because they assume that she knows you best of all, or she knows your current performance. But maybe you just got a new boss a month ago, so your previous boss knows you better. Or maybe you work in finance or banking and you really need that bonus, or you don't want your client to know you're planning to leave, or whatever reason. I haven't told my direct boss yet. I will at the right time. For now, I asked the previous boss or previous manager. Just explain it. 2 sentences. It's very clear. That kind of language is on my website. Inconsistent or questionable academic performance. Again, as I talked about with Stanford's question, why that matters. So they're not. You want to minimize the chance that they're wondering that you can actually graduate. And do the work and be happy and satisfied with the experience. As far as I know, Kellogg doesn't give you any word limit, but again, they say briefly. So more than 500 words here is going to be way too long, and I would say 200 words or 300 words or less, as brief as possible, always with this kind of question. They really are not looking to read anything else. Okay, Insead has 2 types, like Wharton, so in my next video I'll talk about the open type, but here's the closed question. It's very specific. It's the most specific of any of these because it only relates to if you're not currently working. So if you currently are not working at the time of your application, or you're planning to take more than 2 months off between now, your working time, and starting Insead, just explain it. And it's really a helpful question. I wish other schools had this question. Honestly, I really like this question because it is a factor that all admissions officers want to know, which is, please explain your activities and occupations between leaving your job and the start of the program. Just yesterday, I was doing a presentation in Shibuya at Agos, and I was stuck around to answer some questions at the end of my presentation, and a woman came up and said, kind of quietly in a soft voice, I've left my job. Honestly, I left my job to prepare for MBA. Should I say that? And I said to her, well, you need to tell them you left your job. They can guess that it certainly helped your application. Hopefully you'll have a good score, and it's bad that you quit your job and couldn't get a decent score. Anyway, hopefully she'll get the right scores, and anyway, etc. But what I told her is pretty much to follow Insead's logic, which is to show that she's spending her time. I said, what do you want to do after MBA? I want to do HR. She wants to work in the HR field. She wants to be an HR professional. So I said, find an organization that will allow you to do 1 day a week or half a day a week of free, pro bono, volunteer work, essentially, helping them. Even if it's a headhunter, a reputable recruiting service, executive search, something in the HR area to build your skills. Or find a professor at university who teaches HR policy and help him out. Or find some way to show that you're building your network in your next career. I had a client last year who was taking maternity leave, and same thing. In her case, she was lucky because it was in fact part of her goal. Her goal was to help working mothers or working parents be active and contributing members during maternity leave. So that was perfect because she's in technology and marketing. Anyway, I won't say too much about her story. So she was able actually to talk about her maternity leave right away in her goal essay, or YMBA essay related to her maternity leave that she was currently taking. If she weren't that lucky and had that well integrated story, it would go here. I took time off to raise my child, taking maternity leave or paternity leave, whatever it is, or even I had to quit my job to take care of an aging parent or a young child, whatever it is. Just explain it. So Insead, very good question. I need to check on their website if there's a word limit, but you can see that on their application form, whether or not it's a word limit. But it's a closed question for sure. And finally, Harvard. Harvard I saved for last because essentially it's both open and closed. I'm going to change my thing here. It's not mixed, it's actually both. It's closed and open. They say basically, use this section to include any additional information that you believe is important for the MBA admissions board to know in evaluating your application, but that you were unable to include elsewhere in the online application. And then they say, tell us a fun fact about yourself, or just say hello. Okay, do they really want you to write hello and exclamation point? I doubt it. It's 500 characters, first of all, not words, 500 characters. It's extremely short. And then in the application, they explain, please limit your additional information to the space in this section. We'll know you'll be tempted, but please don't send us any additional materials, another recommendation, a work portfolio. Extra materials, they say, will not be considered. And then they go further, and that's why I love Harvard. They try to be as transparent as possible. They say, what are we looking for? So they say basically, here's when you should use it, and here's when you shouldn't use it. You should use it about, again, extenuating life circumstances that may have impacted your record at school or at work, like Stanford, same language. Academic performance was limited for a certain reason, tell us why. Work performance was limited, or there's a gap in your employment for some reason, tell us why. And then when you're unable to submit a recommendation from a current employer, this happens all the time, just use the space to explain the situation and how you selected the alternative recommender. Very clear, very direct. So yes and yes there. Don't send another essay. My MIT essay. Harvard didn't ask for an achievement. I'll stick it in here in 100 words. 500 characters is about 100 words. Bad idea, and they're telling you it's a bad idea. Another school's essay, cut and pasted here. For some reason, a lot of clients want to talk about why Harvard. Yeah, it's kind of like at the Harvard interview where sometimes they say, surprise me. Is it a surprise that you want to go to Harvard? It's Harvard. They assume the world wants to go to Harvard, whether or not it does. They assume they have they're pretty confident they have a 90%, 9 out of 10 people that they take come. They're at the top of the pile in terms of yield. Do they really want you to spend 500 characters basically begging them and trying to show your love for the school? Maybe, if it's a great story, but nah, I don't think so. Most of my clients write something here. A lot of them don't write hello, but they write some little thing. It's hard to have a fun fact because you've got hobbies, activities, awards, clubs and stuff. There are almost as many as Stanford spaces in small boxes, but try to surprise them and say something fun and brief here. If you put it here, you probably can't use it at the interview, but oh well. If you don't have an extenuating circumstance, honestly though, my clients last year, the year before, a lot of them did leave this blank. I think leaving it blank is not a terrible thing. It's much better to leave it blank. If you don't have an extenuating circumstance, it's better to leave it blank than to copy and paste some other school's essay or beg and plead and show that you love Harvard for some reason. They assume you love Harvard. All right, that got long and a bit rambly, but I just wanted to cover all the bases as much as I could. As always, please subscribe for the latest updates. I love making these videos and sharing insights with you whenever I can. In the meantime, best of luck with your applications, and bye for now. We on a world tour with Muhammad, my man, going each and every place with the mic in their hand. Chinatown, Spokane, London, Tokyo.